The narrow gauge railways of India are lovingly called toy trains. They are an heirloom of the British and equally inspire locals and guests from around the world to this day. Hardly any travellers in India would take notice of the town of Kalka were it not for this station. It's the starting point for an exceptional train journey to Shimla. The trains run a scheduled service, but are also a great tourist attraction, not just for railway romantics. The passengers' names are posted outside, so everyone finds their reserved seat. Depending on the season, 5 to 7 trains run every day from Kalka for the short 96.5-kilometre journey. However, it takes 5.5 to 6 hours, sometimes even longer, for instance when excursion trains for the well-to-do are slotted in between. Then the scheduled train must wait at one of the 18 stations because the line only has a single track and only one train can travel between each station. The journey begins around 400 kilometres to the north of today's capital, Delhi, and leads almost exclusively through the province of Himachal Pradesh, to the foothills of the Himalayas, to Shimla, to the city that was the summer residence of the British Indian government for over 80 years until 1947. The Kalka-Shimla line is a masterpiece of British engineering, a superb technical and architectural achievement that was built over 120 years ago. It was included in the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites in 2008. Most of the more than 900 bridges, many of them viaducts, are in their original condition. More than 2/3 of the route is curved. After almost an hour's travel, the train crosses the longest bridge, almost 100 meters long. There are 103 tunnels on a route of only 96.5 kilometers. Another superlative for a line that is over 100 years old. What's more, on its relatively short journey, the train to Shimla manages to negotiate an altitude difference of 1,400 meters. Until 1971, the 6 or 7 carriages were drawn by steam locomotives. Since then, diesel engines have transported passengers at a top speed of 25 kilometers per hour. The line was inaugurated in 1891 by the Viceroy of the time, Lord Curzon, after a construction period of only 2 years. 12 years later, the first passenger train travelled to Shimla. The government's summer residence was finally connected to the railway network. What previously had to be transported by thousands of porters and mules from Calcutta, and later from Delhi to Shimla to run government business, could now be transported by the railway. To this day, travellers from all around the world benefit from the British idea of building a railway in this extremely difficult terrain. Although the journey time on the good road nearby has been much shorter for many years, trains are still almost always fully booked. It's impossible to be as relaxed in a car as one can be in this comfortable compartment, even though the gauge of the track is only 76 centimeters. Most of the viaducts are curved and are therefore easily visible during the journey. Many of the stations, including this one in Palampur, were built near bridges or tunnels. The buildings were used by the construction workers for lodging. Nitender Singh is enthusiastic about his work as a train driver on this unusual route for the last 17 years. I'm very proud to be able to drive this train because I love this country very much. I also like the many visitors from other countries who come here to ride on the train. And when people come to make such a film here, I'm also very happy because that means even more foreigners will visit my country. It's often difficult to get a ticket while on the train. What is common practice on other lines is prohibited here. Clusters of people hanging outside on the carriages. No wonder, considering all the tunnels. This time the stop lasted only a few minutes. We continue along the endless bends towards Shimla. Even people who don't travel by train use the track in this often rough terrain. These people will never be unemployed on this line. Over 200 track workers ensure the safety of passengers. One more fact. All 919 bends have an extra safety track on the inside of the track, making it nearly impossible for the train to derail. Busy activity at one of the most beautiful stations on the line, Barok. Every train stops here for at least 10 minutes. After all, passengers need provisions. Food and drink is only available in the luxury trains with the beautiful name Shivalik Deluxe Express, but they are only used for special services. The train driver throws a small but very important part of the safety system out of his window as he arrives at the station. The British developed it specially for single-track lines. Station Master Sitara Meena explains its purpose. The train line from Kalka to Shimla has existed since 1903, and ever since we've used this block instrument as a communication tool between stations. The station master in Solan, the next stop, gives this token to clear the track for use from here in Barok to Solan. After being cleared, I can remove the token from the instrument. I then pass it on to the signal box operator, who gives it to the train driver. He can drive to the next station with the token. Only when the token has been put into the block instrument, as it's called, can the continuing journey be cleared by the second machine. The same applies to the train travelling in the other direction, which has now arrived in Barok and will continue on towards Kalka. For travellers, the stop at Barok station is a welcome break. Meanwhile, the station master's assistant hands the token to the train driver. The train will depart in just a few minutes. The key in the station office is also part of the safety system. It's the only way to set the points and signal for a continued journey. A simple but effective concept. It's been working for passenger travel for almost 110 years. The diesel locomotives are not quite that old. They've been around for up to 39 years and all come from Germany. Hidden beneath the long bonnet, a 6-cylinder, 700 horsepower engine. Prem Singh has been responsible for cleanliness at his station for 36 years, and not just on the platform. Barrog has even more to offer, especially for true railway enthusiasts who value the atmosphere here. That is also part of Prem Singh's job, who proudly guides us round. Yes, this is our guest house. We also have a restaurant where the food is really good. We also have room for railway staff. It's all well organized and, above all, clean. Despite the road to Shimla, the railway line has lost none of its popularity. What better way is there to enjoy the leisurely journey through the mountainous landscape, which reveals a new aspect after every turn? Anyone travelling from Kalka to Shimla, however, must sit in the dark for almost 8 kilometres. Work on the tunnels, which are mainly curved, was extremely challenging for the engineers of the 19th century. After more than an hour's ride away from Barrog, we encounter the first houses in the district of Solan. The train now passes through a developed area covering several kilometres. Train travel is generally cheap in India. Normally, bus tickets are at least 3 or 4 times as expensive. But the Kalka-Shimla Railway is an exception. Passengers must dig deep into their pockets to enjoy such comfort and beauty. A one-way trip in a standard class car like this one costs around 300 rupees, plus seat reservation. That's a total of 8 or 9 euros, almost twice as much as an average worker earns in a day. Since many people use the track as a walkway, the tunnels have passing points on each side. Solan Station lies right behind tunnel number 38. It's roughly the halfway point of the journey. Solan lies around 1,440 metres above sea level. The train has already managed a height gain of 800 metres, and Solan is worth a stop. For some passengers, the small but vibrant town is at least a temporary destination. It attracts tourists and businessmen alike. Solan is typical for India, noisy and bustling. Cars, motorcycles, tuk-tuks and pedestrians on streets without pavements all create a chaotic muddle that is always miraculously resolved. one of India's most beautiful aspects. There are delicacies on offer at every street corner, and they can be enjoyed without too much concern. Most guest houses and small hotels cook and bake the same way as here on the street. Many Indians know Solan by the name of champignons. A loose translation would be City of Mushrooms, because Solan is the most famous place in the country for mushroom cultivation. The altitude provides ideal conditions. Hundreds of mushroom farms have been established in the town and the surrounding region. Vikas Benal owns one of them. His employees are cooking wheat in enormous cauldrons. It's used as food for the master spores, which are derived from fungus cultures. The temperature and humidity in Solan provide ideal conditions for successful mushroom cultivation for 10 months in the year. The wheat must cook for 20 to 30 minutes. Then calcium carbonate and calcium sulfate are added to achieve the required pH value to culture the mushrooms. The small sacks are taken to the sterilization room. Steam pressure ensures that later only mushroom spores will grow inside the sacks. The process takes more than 2 hours. The owner, Vikas Benal, began cultivating mushrooms in 1990. Today, he's one of the most successful farmers in the country. The sacks are only reopened in the hygiene room. The master spores, which were reared from the same fungus cultures, are now added. The fire ensures absolute sterility. The compost also stems from the same facility and is now added to the master spores. 20 employees produce an almost unbelievable 225 tons of mushrooms in 19 halls every year. On peak days, more than 1,000 kilos of mushrooms are harvested. Does Vikas Benal also have a connection with the railway?
I have very good experience of Kalka-Shimla Railways, and when I was in schools in 70s, I used to go to school by this train from Badog railway station to Solan. When I got my higher studies at Shimla University, I used to travel by this train from Badog railway station to Shimla. In 90s, when I started my mushroom farming, there was no road transport here. I used to transport my mushroom from Solan to Delhi market by this train. And you know, mushroom is a highly perishable product. So when I have to send mushrooms by this train, so a lot of people ask me under table money for transporting mushrooms. So that was okay at that time, and I enjoyed very well by using this train.
A success story that is closely linked with the train line that the British mainly built to continue their government business in the milder highland temperatures during the summer months, rather than remain in the lowlands where it can often be 35 or 40 degrees hot. The luxury train with the red carriages is mainly booked by tour groups. A holiday trip over the impressive viaducts and through the breathtaking landscape can be enjoyed in comfort. Locals often say The British, who ruled India for almost 100 years until its declaration of independence in 1947, left two good things behind: democracy and a first-class railway network. Without it, the chaos on the roads would be unbearable. Yet hardly any other train line in India attracts as many people as this one. "17 diesel locomotives are used today after scheduled services with steam engines finally ended in 1971. One will soon be running again after being restored. The diesel locomotives are maintained in these large halls at Kalka Station. The hall where locomotives are regularly inspected and repaired is lovingly called the Diesel Barracks. 50 specialists have two main goals: no train should ever be cancelled on their behalf, and of course no accidents should occur. In diesel engines for locomotives, every part seems oversized. Almost nothing can be done here without a crane. The men often work under time pressure, even if sensitive parts need soldering or welding. At least 12 of the 17 locomotives must be available every day. Although the locomotives come from Germany, all spare parts are made in India. This testing station measures the durability of the suspension, maintenance work that is required every 2 years. If the suspension passes the stress test, it's remounted onto the cylinders. After all, the locomotives need a lot of power, since on average they climb 1 meter in altitude for every 33 that they travel. That is what the British engineers calculated over 130 years ago when they planned the route. It's reassuring to watch the men at work. They radiate responsibility and professionalism. So does this trained metalworker. I'm Kaldeep Singh, and I've been working for 5 years in this workshop on the Kalka-Shimla line. I love my work and help ensure we have as few faults and accidents as possible. If everything runs smoothly, our workshop has a good reputation. For people from abroad, the Kalka-Shimla Railway is mainly a historical route. If they arrive well and return home as satisfied passengers, that's positive for the whole country. If someone is unmotivated in his work, mistakes will happen. That's not good and is negative for our country. The workshop's director, Titender Singh, has a second important function. A rescue train is always waiting on the tracks in Kalka, ready for deployment. In an emergency situation, the 42-year-old, who's been working for Northern Railway for 17 years, is the operation manager. The worst-case scenario, a train crash with many fatalities, has never happened in the past, but smaller accidents have. Last year we had 4 accidents and faults. The reasons were either engine failure or landslides. As soon as an accident happens, a siren raises the alarm. Then the rescue train must be ready within 30 minutes during the day and 40 minutes at night. The men are on constant standby for this reason. When they hear the sirens, The first thing they do is connect the engine to the rescue train. The rescue troops' equipment allows them to start work immediately because once an accident has happened, the losses must be minimized.
रिस्टोरेशन वर्क स्टार्ट कर दिया जाता है जिससे कि मैक्सिमम लोगों की जान बचाई सके और होने वाले लॉस को कम किया जा सके.
The Pinjora Garden is situated on the outskirts of Kalka. Islamic art and landscape architecture from the height of the Mughal Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries. Palaces with a hitherto unheard of splendor were built here. Pinjora Garden, with its waterworks, is one of the few parks from this period that has survived to this day. But other highlights await passengers on their way to Shimla. Between Solan and Kangra, there are many unusual bridge structures to admire. Two more facts underline the great appreciation for this railway line. 1,200 passengers a day, adding up to a total of 400,000 per year. The most sublime structure is the arched bridge number 541. It covers 4 levels, is over 50 meters high, and has been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Anyone wishing to enjoy the beautiful landscape away from the railway between Solan and Shimla can make a stop at Kandagat or Kangra. The Chale region can be easily reached from here. The fresh mountain air, fascinating views and interesting day trip destinations have made Chale a popular holiday region in recent years. The Kali Mata temple was consecrated in 2005 in an location on the 2,300-meter-high mountain of Kali Ka Tibba. It's dedicated to the Hindu goddess of the same name. The now 80-year-old sadhu, Shambhu Bhati, collected donations for 20 years in order to build the temple. Sadhus are begging monks and are revered as holy men in India. They seek enlightenment through constant penance and an ascetic lifestyle. The son of the builder, Rasheshwar Bhati, during the daily morning arati, a veneration ceremony. Many gods are woken by temple music, washed, clothed, adorned, fed during the day, and brought to sleeping chambers in the evening. The view from up here is overwhelming. Progress is not without consequence. Pristine, remote villages are now few and far between in this region of India. Only 5 or 6 remain. One of them is Yan. It can only be reached this way, or on foot through gorge and river. Lak Ram Mita, the village elder, is on his way back to Yan with his 2 grandchildren. They enjoy the 2-minute journey. They're used to it. But for the uninitiated, it's a real adventure. The cable car was only built 5 years ago. 200 people formed a human chain to tow the cable through the gorge up into the village. Before the cable car, villagers needed 40 or 50 minutes for the outward or return journey. "75 people from 9 families live in peaceful seclusion in Yan. The climate is pleasant, since the village is situated at an altitude of 1,600 meters. Most inhabitants make a living with agriculture and rearing farm animals. However, the son of the village elder is a teacher and his wife a lawyer. The children have to go to school on the other side of the gorge. The clay houses are up to 200 years old. 8 or 9 people live in 6 to 8 rooms. The cattle are kept underneath the living quarters, and the heat from their bodies rises in the winter. The roofs are covered in slate. Pumpkins grow upon them. The quality of life in Yan cannot be measured by normal criteria. The inhabitants have long passed the level of self-sufficiency, especially since they've had better access to the road. Surplus products are sold at nearby markets. Families work closely together and profits are shared. The interior of the homes has not changed much in the last 200 years. Although there's now a small gas stove in the kitchen, the tasty chapatis that the village elder's wife and her daughter-in-law are baking for lunch must be prepared over an open fire. Food in Yan is purely vegetarian. The number of inhabitants in the small village has remained steady for a long time. Lakram Mehta is also optimistic about the future. Since I retired, I've been constantly trying to bring progress to our village. The most important was the cable car over the gorge. It can also transport water for us and fodder for the animals. I keep on telling people here that they should contribute to shaping the future. Of course, that applies to the people in the neighbouring village as well. I'm not worried about the future, though, because my son, for instance, is building a new home for himself and his family, just like that. We're old and should remain in our traditional home, but I think the children should live in new ones according to their wishes. Tomorrow is market day in the town of Chail, so the tomatoes are making the unusual trip by cable car too. Yan is a very special corner of the Kalka-Shimla region. The train is now on the next to last stage on its route to the former summer residence of the British Indian government. The town of Shimla is now within sight up on a mountain ridge. But first, there's another brief stop. Beneath the town lies a well-visited temple compound. The front part is dedicated to the god Ganesha, son of Shiva and Parvati. Many Hindus come here every day to pray and bring offerings. This bull, Nandi, is the divine mount of Shiva, one of the 3 main gods of Hinduism. It simultaneously embodies destruction and renewal. The priest and the monks in the rear part of the temple compound worship Shiva, Rama, and especially the monkey god Hanuman. As the son of a wind god, Hanuman even has the ability to fly. From here, It's not far to the final destination of one of India's most famous train routes, even though Shimla can now be reached more conveniently by air. An altitude difference of 1,400 meters over a distance of only 96.5 kilometers lies behind us. That's even worth an entry in the Guinness Book of Records. India's largest and most popular hill station is situated on a 12-kilometer mountain ridge and covers its summit and slopes. A road surrounds the lower town area, while cars are not permitted in the upper area. Many places of interest are closely connected with the city's history, which was strongly influenced by the British. They took over the town in 1830. The Mall, today an elegant shopping promenade, used to be a place where high society gathered and rode around in rickshaws with their uniformed drivers. Today, it's mainly native and foreign tourists that wander about in the early summer freshness. The location began to grow popular in the mid-19th century as the British sought relief from too much of the Orient. Unlike Calcutta, they could build Shimla according to their own ideas. The most impressive building from this period is the Vice-Regal Lodge, which was the Viceroy's summer residence that was inaugurated in 1855. It was the seat of government until 1947, and it now houses a museum. In 1971, the building made headline news once again throughout the world. Pakistani President Bhutto and Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi signed the Shimla Treaty here. It established a ceasefire in Kashmir between the two countries by defining a line of control. Since access to the upper promenade was reserved for British and Indian aristocracy, a number of shopping streets developed along the steep slopes beneath. They have the fitting name of Lower Bazaar. This Lower Bazaar has been able to retain its own unmistakable charm to this day. The countless alleys are not only great for shopping, but also offer culinary delicacies. The carefully planned holiday resort with British flair, including elegant villas and stately Georgian mansions, has changed very little. Only a few of the old manors have been turned into hotels. For instance, Woodville Palace, lodging under a former royal roof, well guarded. The Jubal royal family, which resided alone here for a long time, has a family tree that can be traced back over 1,000 years. Anyone staying here can still feel that past. Raja Rana Serbagat of Jubal built this stately home. His grandson, a schooled historian who was born in 1949, converted it into a hotel in 1977. With a little luck, guests can enjoy a cup of tea with Raj Kumar Uday Singh. The aristocrat still lives in the building. Has his family benefited from the train line?
The railroad came up in 1903, and this building was purchased by my great-grandfather. It used to be an old building made in the 1850s, which my great-grandfather purchased in 1926. And in 1938, they demolished the old building and they made this new building. So when you say the railroad, the railroad came in handy that all the wood came from our former kingdom, which is called Jubbal. And there was no road to go to Jubbal, which exists now. So it had to go by a different route, and then it came up to a place called Kalka, and from Kalka all the wood came up here, as well as other building material by the train, as well as the furniture, which was all brought from England, from the Army and Navy stores and different companies, and it all came on the train.
Shimla, described in 1817 by a British inspector as a medium-sized village with a fakir who offers travellers water, is now one of the most beautiful tourist destinations in northern India. The exceptional journey to get there on the Kalka-Shimla Railway undoubtedly plays a part, since it not only inspires railway enthusiasts. It's a trip through a magnificent landscape, over dizzying bridges and precipices, past dense forests and through tunnels cut into the rock by sheer manual labour. The roughly 6-hour journey on the so-called toy train is a trip into the past, present and future of a nation that indeed has had a turbulent history and is today the largest democracy in the world.